Have you ever stood in your kitchen with a clean, hard peach pit in your hand, or a small pile of cherry stones left over from the sweetest fruit of summer, and thought, I wonder if I can grow this into a real tree? So you rinse the pit, let it dry, press it into a pot of soil, water it carefully, and wait. A month goes by, then another, then a third, but the soil still looks exactly the same, flat, quiet, and empty. That early excitement slowly fades into frustration, and before long, you throw the whole pot away, thinking maybe you simply were not meant to grow things from seed. If that sounds familiar, listen closely. In my years of working with soil, seeds, orchards, and home gardeners, I can tell you this: the problem was not your lack of patience, and it was not because you needed a more expensive potting mix or a prettier container. Stone fruit seeds are not ordinary seeds. Peaches, cherries, plums, and apricots carry deep biological locks that must be opened in the right order. And the real breakthrough is a simple, precise, 1-hour chemical priming step that many home gardeners never hear about. This technique, used in more serious propagation and breeding work, can help shorten the waiting period, greatly reduce the risk of seed rot, and wake up even stubborn stone fruit seeds that seem completely lifeless from the outside. Today, we are opening the biological vault of the prunus family, the group that includes peaches, cherries, plums, and apricots. You will learn the exact 1-hour soak that can speed up germination, why it works inside the seed, and how to follow the process step by step with confidence. By the end, you will not just be copying instructions, you will understand what is happening beneath the shell, so when something looks wrong, you will know how to adjust instead of giving up. Let's begin. Part 1. The evolutionary lock: why stone fruits sleep so deep. To wake a seed properly, we first need to understand why it is sleeping in the first place. Stone fruits are not stubborn by accident. Peaches, cherries, plums, and apricots have developed a very smart double-lock system over thousands of years, and that system exists for one reason: survival. Think about what happens in nature. A ripe cherry or peach drops from the tree in the warm, moist days of late summer. If that seed were to sprout immediately, the tiny seedling would be soft, young, and completely unprepared for the freezing weather that comes with winter. It would almost certainly die before it ever had a real chance to grow. So the seed protects itself with two kinds of dormancy: one physical and one chemical. The first is mechanical dormancy. The hard outer shell, called the endocarp, acts like a tough wooden shield around the living seed inside. It slows down water absorption and limits how much oxygen can reach the embryo. Without enough moisture and oxygen, the seed cannot begin the process of growth. The second is chemical dormancy. Even if some water slowly finds its way through that hard shell, the embryo is still being held back from the inside. The seed coat and the stored tissues contain natural germination inhibitors, especially abscisic acid, or ABA. I like to think of ABA as the seed's internal brake pedal. It tells the embryo, not yet, stay asleep, wait until the season is right. This is why many gardeners fail when they simply bury a fresh peach pit or cherry stone in soil and keep watering it. The seed is not ready just because we are ready. In many cases, all that moisture does is invite mold and rot. What the seed is really waiting for is a biological message that winter has passed and spring is safe enough for growth. Part 2. The harvest and the cleanse: eliminating the pathogens. Every strong tree begins with a good starting point, and with stone fruits, that means choosing the right fruit before you ever touch the seed. The first rule is simple: begin with fully ripe, high-quality fruit. Pits taken from hard, green, underripe fruit, especially fruit harvested early for long supermarket shipping, often contain embryos that have not fully matured. And if the embryo is not mature, no trick, soak, or soil mix can force it to become a healthy seedling. When possible, I always prefer fruit from a local farmer's market, a backyard tree, or a source growing well in your region. Those seeds often come from trees already adapted to your local climate, which gives your future seedling a better beginning. Once you eat the fruit, do not leave the pit sitting around with sticky pulp on it. Cleaning needs to happen right away. Rinse the pit thoroughly under cool running water and remove every trace of fruit flesh. This step may look simple, but it matters more than many beginners realize. That sweet pulp is full of sugar and soft organic fiber, and to mold spores, that is a feast. Later, when the seed goes into a damp environment for stratification, those spores can wake up fast. Instead of supporting germination, that moisture can turn into a breeding ground for fungus, and the seed may rot before it even has a chance to open. Use a stiff brush, a rough cloth, or a clean rag to scrub the hard pit until the surface feels smooth and bare. For larger batches of cherry stones, there is a useful old homestead method I like. Place the seeds in a bowl with a handful of clean, rough gravel or small driveway stones. Add a little water, then rub and squeeze them together by hand. The friction from the stones scrapes away the stubborn fruit fibers quickly and evenly. After cleaning, pat the pits dry with a towel. Then let them sit in a shaded, well-ventilated indoor area until the outside feels dry to the touch. This usually takes about 24 to 72 hours. That short drying period also helps the living seed inside shrink very slightly away from the inner wall of the hard shell. That tiny separation creates a small air gap, and that matters because the next step is cracking the pit. A little space inside can make the difference between opening the shell safely and crushing the seed. Part 3. The art of the break, mechanical scarification without crushing. Now that the pits are clean and dry, we can deal with the first major lock, the hard endocarp. In nature, this woody shell is slowly weakened by soil pressure, freeze-thaw cycles, moisture, microbes, and time. But in home propagation, we can shorten that process by using mechanical scarification. The goal is to remove the true seed from the hard outer shell so water and oxygen can reach it much more easily. For many prunus seeds, removing the endocarp can greatly reduce the time they need in cold conditions. But this step must be done with patience. We are not smashing the pit. We are carefully releasing the living seed from its hard casing. Do not use a heavy hammer if you can avoid it. A hammer strike is too sudden and too difficult to control. It may crack the shell, but it can also crush or bruise the delicate embryo inside. A better choice is an adjustable vice grip plier, a handheld nutcracker, or a bench-mounted vise. If you are using vice grip pliers, adjust the jaw so it is just slightly narrower than the narrowest part of the pit. Lay the pit on its side and line the jaws up with the natural seam running along the shell. Before applying pressure, wrap the pit in a clean cloth or towel. This protects your eyes from sharp fragments and also softens the sudden pop when the shell gives way. Now squeeze slowly and steadily until you hear a clean crack. Stop there. Open the towel carefully, remove the broken woody pieces, and take out the cream-colored, almond-like seed inside. Handle this inner seed with care. Try not to nick, scrape, or tear the thin brown protective skin around it. That outer skin, called the testa, is part of the seed's defense. If the seed is cut, badly bruised, or split during extraction, it becomes much more vulnerable to rot during the cold, moist stratification period. Inspect every seed before moving on. Keep only the ones that are plump, intact, and healthy-looking. Discard any that are shriveled, moldy, soft, or seriously damaged. In seed work, quality control at the beginning saves you from disappointment weeks later. Part 4. The 1-hour chemical keys, the biochemistry of H2O2. Now we come to the central step in this method, the 1-hour chemical priming soak using diluted hydrogen peroxide, or H2O2. This is a step often used in more serious propagation, breeding, and seed handling work, but it is still rarely explained clearly in everyday home gardening. So why hydrogen peroxide instead of plain water? Plain water can hydrate the outer tissues, but it does very little against the microscopic pathogens hiding on the seed coat. Fungal spores and bacteria are often invisible. They sit in tiny cracks and surface textures on the seed, waiting for the cool, damp environment of stratification. Once conditions become moist enough, they can begin feeding on the seed's stored nutrients. Hydrogen peroxide is very similar to water in structure, but it carries one extra oxygen atom. That extra oxygen makes it unstable and highly reactive in a controlled way. When the extracted seeds are placed into a diluted hydrogen peroxide solution, several useful things begin happening at the same time. First, it helps with chemical scarification and softening. As hydrogen peroxide breaks down, it can gently weaken the tougher outer polymers of the seed coat. This makes the seed coat more open to moisture and gas exchange, which are both essential for germination. Second, it supplies an oxygen boost. As peroxide decomposes, it releases oxygen into the surrounding solution and toward the seed tissues. Stone fruit seeds need good oxygen availability to restart mitochondrial respiration, the process that produces the energy needed for cell division and early root growth. In simple terms, oxygen helps fuel the embryo's engine after a long period of dormancy. Third, hydrogen peroxide can act as a biological signal. At the molecular level, it is involved in pathways that help reduce the influence of abscisic acid, the hormone that keeps the seed asleep, while supporting the action of growth-promoting hormones such as gibberellic acid. In studies on peach seeds, peroxide treatments have been linked with shorter stratification periods and more even germination. For the home gardener, the method is straightforward. Use standard 3% household hydrogen peroxide. For tougher seeds, it can be used directly from the bottle. For more delicate seeds, dilute it to about 1% by mixing 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 2 parts distilled water. Place your cleaned, extracted seeds into a small, clean glass container and fully submerge them in the solution. Part 5. The Danger Zone. Why timing is a life and death decision. In gardening, just like in good soil management, the line between helping a plant and harming it often comes down to dose and timing. Hydrogen peroxide is useful because it is active, but that is exactly why we must respect it. Used briefly and correctly, it can clean the seed surface, soften the seed coat, and support the first stages of awakening. Left too long, it can damage the very embryo we are trying to protect. This is the one detail I want you to take seriously. Do not guess the soaking time. Set a real timer for exactly 1 hour. Not about 1 hour. Not until you remember. Not while you run errands, make lunch, or take a nap. 1 hour means 1 hour. At first, the peroxide is doing helpful work on the outside of the seed. It is reducing surface pathogens, loosening the tougher outer layers, and improving the seed's ability to take in moisture and oxygen. But if the soak continues into the second or third hour, that same oxidizing action can begin moving too deeply into the living tissues of the embryo. At the microscopic level, too much reactive oxygen can trigger oxidative stress. That stress can damage important enzymes, weaken cell membranes, and interfere with the seed's ability to restart normal growth. From the outside, a seed soaked too long may still look perfectly fine. You may pull it from the solution and think nothing went wrong. But inside, the living spark may already be gone. Then, when you place that seed into cold stratification, it will not sprout. It may slowly turn gray, become soft and rot in the medium. And the frustrating part is that you may blame the refrigerator, the soil, or the seed itself, when the real mistake happened during the soak. So the rule is simple and strict. Exactly 1 hour in a 1% to 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. As soon as the timer rings, pour off the solution immediately. Then rinse the seeds under cool, clean water for at least 30 seconds. This rinse matters because it removes leftover peroxide from the seed surface and stops the oxidizing effect before it can interfere with normal moisture absorption during the weeks ahead. Part 6. Replicating winter, the squeeze test and cold stratification. After the 1 hour soak, we still need to meet the seed's deeper biological requirement. Stone fruit seeds are built to experience winter before they grow, so now we have to recreate those cold, dark, moist conditions in a controlled way. This process is called cold stratification, and the details matter. The medium you use should hold moisture without becoming heavy or suffocating. Clean horticultural sand, vermiculite, perlite, sterile peat moss, or a balanced mix of these materials can all work well. What we are looking for is moisture plus air. Seeds need water to wake up, but they also need oxygen. Too dry, and the seed can dehydrate. Too wet, and it can rot from lack of air. To get the moisture level right, use the squeeze test. Moisten your chosen medium with clean water and mix it thoroughly. Then take a large handful and squeeze it firmly in your palm. If water drips through your fingers, it is too wet. Add more dry sand, peat, or other dry medium and mix again. If you open your hand and the material falls apart like dust, it is too dry. Add just a little water and test it again. But if the medium holds together in a firm clump, with no water dripping out, you have the balance we want. It should feel moist, but still light and breathable. Now take your sanitized seeds and mix them gently into the damp medium. A good working ratio is about 2 parts medium to 1 part seeds. Place the mixture into a clean, sealable plastic bag or a sterile glass jar. If you use a plastic bag, leave it just slightly unzipped, or make a few tiny pinholes near the top so there can be slow gas exchange. Label the container with the fruit type and the date. This small habit saves confusion later, especially when you are working with more than one variety. Then place the container in the refrigerator, ideally where the temperature stays between 34 and 41 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 1 to 5 degrees Celsius. One important warning: do not store your seed bag in the same crisper drawer with apples, bananas, or ripe tomatoes. These fruits release ethylene gas, a natural ripening hormone. In a closed refrigerator space, too much ethylene can disturb the seed's internal chemical balance and may lead to poor development, early decay, or abnormal growth. Check the seeds every week or two. You do not need to disturb them constantly, but you do want to make sure the medium stays lightly moist. If the inside of the bag looks dry and condensation disappears, give the medium a very light misting. Because we remove the hard endocarp and use the 1-hour peroxide soak, the seeds can often begin cracking and showing tiny root tips weeks earlier than untreated pits. Part 7. Radical Emergence and the Cradle. Planting the Fragile Life. For peaches, you may begin seeing results around week 6 to 8. For cherries, it often takes longer, usually around week 10 to 12. Then one day, when you open the stratification bag, you will see the first real sign of life, a small, porcelain white root tip pushing out from the seed. That root tip is called the radical, and it means the seed has broken dormancy. This is an exciting moment, but it is also a delicate one. Do not leave the seed in the bag until the root becomes long, tangled, or twisted. A young radical is extremely fragile. It is made of soft, water-filled cells, and it can snap with very little pressure. If that root breaks, the seedling may be badly weakened or may not survive at all. As soon as you see the white root tip emerging, it is time to pot the seed. Choose a deep container, at least 6 inches deep. Stone fruit seedlings quickly form a strong taproot, and that root wants to grow downward. If the container is too shallow, the root can bend, circle, or become stressed early. Fill the pot with a high-quality, well-aerated potting mix that holds moisture but drains well. A mix based on compost, peat, and perlite works nicely. Pre-moisten the soil before planting, so the seed does not dry out after moving. Make a small indentation in the center of the pot, about ½ an inch deep. Handle the seed very gently by its sides, or use tweezers if needed. Place it into the hole with the white root tip pointing downward into the soil. Here is a detail many beginners miss. Do not bury the whole seed deeply under wet soil. The white radicals should be covered and in contact with moist soil, but the brown, almond-like seed body should sit level with the soil surface or just slightly above it. This helps prevent rot. When the seed body is buried too deep in heavy, damp soil, fungal problems can develop around the cotyledons before they open. By keeping the seed body slightly exposed, it stays drier in the air, while the young root remains safely hydrated below. Place the pot under a good grow light or in a warm room with bright, indirect sunlight. Keep the soil evenly moist but never soggy. In the days that follow, the tiny stem will begin to lift, the seed coat will loosen, and the first green leaves will unfold toward the light. That is the moment when a hard, silent pit finally begins to look like the young fruit tree it was carrying all along. Part 8. Awakening to the Sun. The Hardening Off Protocol. As your young peach or cherry seedling begins growing indoors under gentle light and steady care, it is living in a protected world. The temperature is stable, the air is calm, the light is controlled, and nothing challenges it the way the outdoors will. It has not yet felt a strong breeze, a cold night, a sudden temperature swing, or the sharp intensity of direct sunlight. This is why you should never take a tender 6-inch seedling from indoors and plant it straight into the garden on a hot, bright day. To us, it may look healthy and ready. But to the plant, that sudden change can be a shock. The leaves can scorch and turn pale, the stem can wilt, and in severe cases, the little tree can collapse within a couple of days. To help it survive outside, we need to guide it through a gradual transition called hardening off. This is where we slowly train the seedling to handle real outdoor conditions. We are not just moving a plant from one place to another. We are helping it build strength in its tissues, adjust to brighter light, and become more resilient. The hardening off process usually takes about 7 to 10 days, and it works best when done with discipline. From day 1 to day 3, take the potted seedling outside during the coolest, mildest part of the morning. Place it in full shade, somewhere protected, such as under a porch, beside a wall, or beneath the light cover of a mature tree. Keep it out of direct wind and direct sun. Leave it outside for 1 hour, then bring it back indoors. On days 4 and 5, move the pot to a place with dappled morning light or gentle partial shade. Increase the outdoor time to 3 or 4 hours, but bring it back inside before the strong afternoon heat arrives. On days 6 and 7, allow the seedling to receive 5 to 6 hours of direct morning sun. At this stage, the stem will begin to toughen as the plant responds to outdoor air movement. Those light breezes help it build stronger structure, and the leaves begin adjusting to brighter light. By around day 10, the seedling should be ready to stay outside through the day. It can now handle stronger sun, more airflow, and the natural rhythm of outdoor conditions much better than it could at the beginning. During this whole process, do not leave young stone fruit seedlings outside overnight if there is any risk of late frost or cold, harsh wind. A first-year peach or cherry seedling does not yet have the bark thickness or storage strength to handle freezing conditions safely. Once the plant is hardened off, transplant it into a sunny, well-draining spot in the garden. Give it room for its roots to spread. Mulch around the base to hold soil moisture, and protect the young bark from rabbits, mice, and other rodents with a simple tree guard or wire wrap. From there, that little kitchen scrap experiment can slowly become a strong fruit tree, and one day, a lasting part of your landscape. Conclusion: the lesson of the stony grave. There is something quietly beautiful about the life of a stone fruit seed. When you hold a peach pit or a cherry stone in your hand, it looks almost lifeless. It is hard, cold, sealed, and silent. It keeps water out, limits the air, and protects its living center behind a shell that seems almost impossible to open. But that stone is not empty. It is waiting. Inside it is the possibility of green leaves, spring blossoms, strong roots, and sweet fruit in the summers to come. But before that life can rise into the sunlight, the seed has to pass through cold, darkness, moisture, and time. Its hard shell must be weakened. Its chemical brakes must be released. Its protective barriers must soften just enough for growth to begin. And I think there is a lesson in that. Many times in life, we go through our own winter seasons. We feel stuck. We feel locked behind heavy walls of difficulty, loss, uncertainty, or delay. We look around and think nothing is happening. It feels as if we have been buried in the dark. But what if you are not buried? What if you have been planted? What if that quiet, cold, difficult season is not there to destroy you, but to prepare you? What if the pressure you feel is the shell beginning to loosen? What if the waiting is not wasted, but part of the process that helps you finally push toward the light? The 1-hour soak we talked about today is not a careless shortcut. It works because it addresses the real biological barriers standing between the seed and its potential. Once you understand that, you will never look at a peach pit, a cherry stone, or even your own hard seasons in quite the same way again. Every peach, plum, cherry, or apricot pit you have ever thrown away carried that hidden promise inside. It only needed the right conditions, the right timing, and someone patient enough to understand what it was waiting for. If this kind of practical, tested, and grounded growing method is what you enjoy, make sure to subscribe to Earthly Delights and turn on the notification bell. Next week, we are going to compare these seed-grown young trees with store-bought nursery saplings and see which ones establish faster in the ground and move toward fruit production first. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, keep your mind open, and remember, some of the greatest delights of the earth begin in the dark. Happy planting, my friends.